At the time that the pyramids of Egypt were capturing the imagination of the ancient world, enteral nutrition was raring to go. I don't know how many of this audience knows Imhotep. Not many, I suppose. But I'm sure you will definitely know this person from Hollywood from the movie The Mummy Returns, the evil Imhotep. But what's important to know is that the Eber Papyrus, which is one of the most important papers of ancient Egyptian medicine, have excerpts of Imhotep's advice to people with respect to nutrition. The Eber Papyrus actually describes enteral nutrition in the form of rectal enemas, which would deliver milk, whey, wine, and barley as a form of food. What you see here is Francois de la Rochefoucauld, noted French author of Maxims and Memoirs, once said that to eat is a necessity, but to eat intelligently is an art. We all know the pace with which medicine is moving. However, scientists and investigators have been trying to figure out the link between food and health for much longer than you think. Way back in 400 BC, Hippocrates was the first one to realize that a person's healthy body and mind is closely associated with the food that he eats. And hence he went on to say, "Let thy food be thy medicine, and let thy medicine be thy food." Probably the first randomized trial in this regards was conducted by James Lind, a physician in the British Navy. Sailors who were on a long expedition developed a severe bleeding disorder that we call scurvy. James randomized sailors on duty to water, vinegar, and lime juice. Those who had the limes did not develop the bleeding, and that's why British sailors up to now are called limeys. James Lind did find the link between vitamin C and scurvy. The concept of metabolism and the conversion of oxygen and food to carbon dioxide and water, and thus the production of energy, was given to us by the father of clinical nutrition, Antoine Lavoisier. The credit of using enteral nutrition as therapy goes to John Hunter, who made an orogastric tube with whalebone wrapped in eel skin connected to an animal bladder that served as a reservoir to mix jelly, honey, milk, wine, and whipped eggs, and then sent it through the tube. The advent of machinery in the industrial age paced up the way enteral nutrition was handled. The initial hard, non-flexible tubes were replaced by the first flexible orogastric tube with a stomach pump, which was introduced by the noted physician Kussmaul, which was primarily devised for a gastric decompression and lavage. This device was modified by Ewald and Osser to make it more flexible and put to use during the World War, where many lives were saved, as all feeding, administration of medicines, and enemas were given through the same stomach pump, orogastric, or enema set. So tube feeding was gaining kind of a great momentum, and what they did notice was direct feeding with a syringe was a huge amount of feed intolerance was seen, and that gave the advent of drip feeding, seen here, where food was dripped into the GIT with the help of a funnel. It was around this time, that is the 1920s, that a scientific understanding of nutrient metabolism was starting to take shape, and the first organization called the American Association of Dietology was formed, which laid the very first guidelines on enteral nutrition. And it is difficult to believe that the famous Harris-Benedict equation came into existence so long back. At this point, I must allude to a little bit of history of formula feeding, which has gained so much importance in enteral nutrition. Throughout history, it was seen that if the infant lost her mother or the mother was unable to breastfeed, wet nurses were provided who took over this responsibility. It means that if there was no wet nurses, these infants died. It took around 50 years to create the first commercial prepared feeding formula, sold in London by Liebig's Concentrated Milk Company, the makeup of which was very identical to that of breast milk. Very soon, companies started preparing commercial feeding formula, and there were ads released which talked about the formula being used as a supplement, not only as replacement for breast milk. The acceptance was not great even then, and hence ads like these were placed in local papers, giving rise to the concept that supplement nutrition will help to tide over crisis and improve overall health. This gave impetus to a more scientific way of delivering nutrition, giving rise to the very popular Thomas Morgan percentage formula, in which he diluted cow's milk, added honey and sugar, and thus made the commercial feeding formula more and more scientific. In fact, President Garfield was given peptonized beef broth, beef peptonide, and whiskey every 4 hours for almost 79 days. after a gunshot wound and he survived. The 1900s showed new techniques that had been developed to establish tube feeding, and here you see a gastrostomy without a laparoscopy being done. The last 20 years have seen great changes in this field of nutrition. As time has gone by, parenteral nutrition has become even more important and has stamped its place in nutrition. Machines like indirect calorimetry has taught us that we need to measure and not estimate, and has thus become the gold standard in monitoring and prescribing kilocalories of energy. Hand grip dynamometry has proved to be a great tool to understand functional improvement and nutritional adequacy. Instruments like bioelectrical impedance analysis meters, core track guided feeding tubes, insertions have made the science of nutrition much more objective, much more practical, and importantly, much more safe. So at present, we are in a revival period in clinical nutrition and critical care, especially even in the area of pharmaconutrition. The use of basic clinical pharmacology, molecular biology, and clinical research principles in the study of nutritional therapy will lead to answers on how to administer the right nutrients in the right amounts at the right time to critically ill patients. With this, I welcome you all to the most anticipated clinical nutrition event, which is all set to explore the latest developments in nutrition science and clinical topics while empowering you with critical thinking and decision making. Welcome to the Nutrition Bootcamp.